Given a string with words and spaces, our job is to write a function and return the length of the last word. Here are the rules. A word has continuous non-space characters. String may have leading or trailing spaces, and multiple spaces can exist between words. Let's understand in detail. In this example, word is the last word and its length is 5. In the second example, as per our rules, string can have leading spaces or trailing spaces and spaces in between. Passion is the last word and its length is 7. What are the other scenarios? The input string can be empty, or input string can have all spaces, or input string can have spaces and a single word, and so on. So our function should handle all these conditions. If we have this input string, coding is my passion, our first instinct is split string into individual words. Once string is split, we can pick the last word and return its length, which is 7. But this approach will use extra memory to save all the words, and we need to do unnecessary processing, and this is not optimal solution. So what is the better way to solve this problem? Let's understand step by step. Let's build our logic. What if we start from the end of the string? We start from the end and skip all trailing spaces and reach to the point where we have first non-space character. Once we reach this character, we'll use count variable and start counting until we reach the space or we reach the first character in the string. So instead of finding each word, we'll just find where the last word ends and begins. Let's develop basic code and improve as we progress. We need to write length of last word function, which accepts a character string as input and returns the last word's length. We will start from the end. Let's use one variable which will hold the last character's index, int I equal to strlen of s minus 1. So I will hold the last character's index. If there are any trailing spaces, we need to ignore all the spaces and I variable should hold the index of valid character. Let's write the while loop. While s of I equal to space. Then what we need to do? We need to decrement I. So I minus minus. But now this loop has a problem. What will happen if our input string has just spaces? Initially I will hold this value 1. Since this is the space, we decrement I, so I will hold the 0th index. Again this is the space, so we decrement I and I will hold the minus 1 index now. Once I holds minus 1, we'll try to access s of minus 1 and program will crash. So we need to handle this condition properly. Let's write the proper condition. I should be greater than or equal to 0 and after this while loop, I will hold the index of a valid character. So I will hold this index. Let's use one len variable, int len, and initially its value is 0. Now we need to decrement I and increment length until we find this space. We will increment the len variable if we have a valid character, which means if we don't encounter a space. Let's write the while loop. While s of I is not equal to space. Then what we need to do? We need to increment len plus plus and I minus minus. Again this loop has a similar problem. What if we have a single word, say passion, and I is holding the last index value? With this while loop we are decrementing I, right, until we reach the space. But there is no space here. So what will happen at this point? I will hold the value minus 1. So we need to guard this condition properly. So we need to traverse this loop as long as I is greater than or equal to 0. And so with this while loop, what we are doing? Initially I is pointing to the last valid character and we are decrementing I and incrementing the length until we hit the space or we reach the beginning of the string. So finally len variable will have the length of the last word. So we return len. Now let's see the complete working code. Here is the complete working code for your quick reference. Analyze this code and check whether it works for all possible scenarios. What will happen if we have an empty string? What will happen if we have only all spaces? What will happen if we have only one word? What will happen if we have trailing spaces and single word? And so on. Share your answers in the comment below.